In a federal courthouse in New York City today, the trial began for a man who is arguably the biggest drug trafficker in the world, or at least used to be. Joaquin Guzman, better known as El Chapo, eluded capture for decades.
The trial is under tight security, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. Jury selection began today, and for their protection, the jurors will remain anonymous. Megan Rulli has the story.
He's one of the most notorious drug lords in the world.
The reputation of brutality, of killing people in horrible ways to maintain control over the cartel.
Joaquin Guzman, better known as El Chapo, accused of dozens of murders and selling hundreds of tons of cocaine. Guzman was extradited from Mexico last year to face drug conspiracy charges here in the U.S. He's already escaped jail twice in Mexico and is known for intimidating witnesses.
The magnitude of the Sinaloa cartel and the literally tons of drugs that come into this country. He's got an extensive network throughout the United States.
Now authorities are in overdrive as his trial gets underway here in New York City. He's being held in a high-security wing of a federal jail in Manhattan, a place filled with some of the country's worst terrorists and mobsters. Guzman's lawyer says the past 15 months in solitary has changed his client.
His mental state has deteriorated, not just his memory, but just his affect, the way he understands things.
But police say they cannot take any chances. They transport him to the courthouse in Brooklyn by shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge, rushing him in a police motorcade with a SWAT team and an ambulance, and it's all tracked by helicopters.
That transportation part is the big vulnerability. It may look like overkill, but I think they're doing it for a really good, valid reason.
And that was Maggie Rulli reporting. Joining us now to discuss this case is Varghese, a defense attorney and former prosecutor. Vanu, we'll ask you about the security in a sec, but in terms of the case, the 17 counts, how difficult a case is this for the prosecution?
Look, based on, I have the indictment here, I've went through it. They have a mountain of evidence. This is as close for the prosecution to have a slam dunk as possible. It's a very strong case. They have, the defense attorneys have gotten a number of adjournments because they've, the government keeps adding more things on. But the one thing I will say is that for El Chapo, he's got potentially the best judge in the world. Judge Kogan, I've tried 2 cases in front of him. I had another intense federal hearing. There's nobody who will cut it down the middle and give him a fair shot than Judge Kogan.
A lot of security is involved around this trial. We saw that they shut down the Brooklyn Bridge, and Maggie Rulli also reporting that the jurors will remain anonymous. But is it really safe for them, even while remaining anonymous? How do you protect them?
Look, while he might try to get off the Brooklyn Bridge, it's historically shorties like to go underground, not over water, So, I think the issue is that, first, as far as protecting the jury, the anonymous jury poll, this isn't Mexico, this isn't Colombia. I think the jurors are going to be fine. They're going to be, taken to and from, and there's a bunch of protections in place. Listen, an anonymous jury is very difficult for the defense team. It's a huge disadvantage because you can't do the research on figure out what these people, what their views are.
And you can't see them as well? I mean, they're behind some sort of screen? Is that how it works?
I don't know the exact...
How unusual is that?
It's very rare. I mean, it's a very rare sort of thing. And you've got to wonder, overall, look, history is going to judge, this country very harshly for its war on drugs, right? So when you look at this 10, 15, 20 years down the line when there's going to be more regulation of this stuff, you got to wonder how many millions, if not billions of dollars were wasted on the drug war. I mean, $14 billion enterprise, imagine if it had been taxed and done properly.
What could be the line of defense for El Chapo?
Well, I think the attorneys, look, he's got some very good lawyers that he's hired. There was an issue at first, but I think they cleared some funds because there's a thing where the government will seize most of his assets, but they did release some of it to allow him to hire private lawyers. The defense is going to be that these guys are very bad guys, and they're overstating El Chapo's role in this enterprise, that he wasn't the top dog, even though one of his other names, when he had a bunch of nicknames, El Jefe, Nana, Appa, Papa. I mean, he's got a lot. It wasn't just El Chapo.
And given that he was able to escape out of a Mexican jail, through a helicopter, obviously great concerns about some effort being made here in New York. Do you see that as a possibility that at least there might be an attempt?
I would be amazed if he even tried. I mean, I think it's a very different world. I don't even know if they need to put him. I mean, there's another federal prison in Brooklyn that's very tight security. I've been in both the Manhattan prison and the federal prison.
Not as a defendant.
No, thank God. Thankfully not.
Defense attorney and former prosecutor Varghese. Vanu, thanks for coming in. Good to see you.